It was one of those humid summer nights, the kind where the heat seems to settle in your bones and everything feels slower. I had just returned from another draining day at work. As usual, I dragged myself through the door, exhausted. But there was something different tonight. The moment I stepped into the house, I felt it. The air was thick, charged with a kind of unspoken anticipation. There he was, sitting on the couch. His broad shoulders relaxed, but his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart skip. Lucas, my husband, was holding a glass of whiskey in his hand. The soft amber liquid reflected the dim light of the living room, but it was his gaze that caught me. I could feel him studying me, as if he were reading every thought, every emotion. I sat down beside him, my body weary from the day, but his presence was electric. He didn't speak at first, just watched me with a quiet intensity. "How was your day?" he finally asked, his voice softer than usual, almost a whisper. I shrugged, trying to shake off the weight of my tiredness. Just the usual." But Lucas wasn't listening to my words. Instead, his hand moved gently to rest on my thigh, a touch that felt familiar, but tonight, there was something more to it. His fingers lightly traced circles on my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to face him, feeling my pulse quicken as his eyes bore into me. He leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear, his voice low and intimate. "I've been thinking," he began, his breath warm against my skin, "about us, about what we need." My breath hitched at his words. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew it wasn't just a casual conversation. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to mask the mix of curiosity and confusion in my voice. He smiled, a dark gleam in his eyes, and his hand slid higher along my leg, gently pulling me closer. "I think we need something different. Something to make things exciting again." The words hit me like a wave. Something different? My heart raced in my chest as I tried to process what he was saying. Was he asking me to do something? Strange? Exciting? I echoed, my voice shaky. Lucas, however, didn't seem fazed. He was confident, even more so than usual. He was leading us somewhere, and I didn't know where yet, but I could feel the pull. "I want you to be with other men," he whispered. His words were daring, almost reckless, and yet I found myself frozen in place, unable to reply. Other men? I couldn't even process what he had just suggested. I pulled back slightly, trying to gauge if he was serious, but his eyes were full of desire, full of something I hadn't seen before, something raw and genuine. "I want you to be with 3 strong, confident men," he continued, his voice thick with longing. "I want to see you explore that side of yourself. With them." The words left me speechless. A million thoughts collided in my mind. I had never imagined such a thing. Lucas, my loving, kind husband, was asking for something so wild, so unconventional. But when I looked at him, I saw no hesitation. There was only excitement and trust in his eyes. "I know it's a lot to ask," Lucas said gently, taking my hand in his. "But I think it could bring us closer. I want to see you, feel things in a way we've never experienced." His words resonated with something deep within me, a pull I couldn't ignore. The idea, though shocking, stirred something inside me. A part of me was drawn to the possibility, to the chance of something new and thrilling. After a long silence, I finally whispered, "Okay." I wasn't sure why I agreed, but I felt a deep, inexplicable need to please him, to explore this unknown territory together. The air between us felt different that night, as if the universe had shifted just slightly, and everything was poised on the brink of something entirely new. I had no idea what was coming next, but there was a peculiar feeling of anticipation that hung in the room, thick and electric. My body was responding to it. My pulse quickened, and my heart began to race. Aiden had been quiet for a while, just watching me, his eyes intense, like he was waiting for the perfect moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower than usual, a soft lilt to his words that made me pause. "You know," he began, his gaze never leaving mine, "I've been thinking about us, about what we could do together." His words were unexpected, and my stomach fluttered with curiosity. We had always been adventurous in our relationship, but this felt different. His voice, usually warm and comforting, now held a hint of something else, something bold and daring. I nodded, unsure where this was heading. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aiden shifted closer to me, and I could feel the heat from his body as he leaned in, his hand gently resting on my leg. "I think we're ready for something new, something Exciting? He said, his lips brushing lightly against my earlobe, sending a shiver down my spine. I could tell that he was trying to gauge my reaction, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. But I had always trusted Aiden. He had never steered me wrong before. What kind of new? I murmured, my breath catching slightly. I had no idea what he was getting at, but the playful glint in his eyes made me both nervous and curious at the same time. Aiden took a deep breath, his fingers trailing up the inside of my thigh, making my heart race. I think it's time we take our intimacy to the next level, he said slowly, each word heavy with meaning. I want to see you with other men. The words hit me like a shock, and I pulled back slightly, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I had just heard. What, other men? I repeated, trying to process what he was saying. I glanced at him, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. Aiden smiled softly, sensing my confusion, but his expression was filled with something I hadn't seen in him before, something wild and passionate. Yes, but not just any men, he continued, his voice full of an intensity that made my pulse spike. I want to see you with 3 strong, confident, and powerful men. I want to watch you experience something new, something bold and beautiful. I want you to be free in a way you've never been before. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing in my chest as I tried to process what he was asking me. 3 men? The thought was so wild, so outside of anything I had ever imagined. But as I looked into Aiden's eyes, there was no judgment there, only a raw, unfiltered longing that seemed to call to something deep inside of me. You want to watch me with 3 men? I asked again, my voice shaking slightly, not sure whether I was excited, scared, or confused. Aiden nodded, his hand still resting on my leg, moving ever so slightly as if testing my reaction. I want to see you with them, he said softly, but his eyes were filled with fire. I want to see you lose yourself in their touch. I want to see you experience something that we could never recreate alone. I want to give you that freedom. My mind raced. The idea felt so foreign, so far outside of what I had ever thought possible. But as I looked at him, I saw not just desire, but trust. A trust that he knew this would be something that brought us closer, something that would push the boundaries of our love, in a way we hadn't dared to before. For a moment, I was silent. I needed time to process it all. But as I thought about Aiden's words, something unexpected stirred within me. There was a part of me that felt intrigued. Not just by the idea itself, but by the trust Aiden was placing in me. He wasn't asking me to do this because he didn't love me. Quite the opposite. He wanted to share something deeply intimate with me, to explore a boundary together. And that was a powerful feeling. I let out a slow breath and looked at him, my thoughts swirling in my mind. And what exactly do you expect from me? I asked, my voice quiet, my nerves evident in the way my fingers gripped the armrest. Aiden leaned in closer, his lips brushing against my ear again as he whispered, I want you to be free, to let go and lose yourself in it. Let the men touch you, kiss you, explore you. I want you to feel desired in a way that you've never felt before. I want to see you experience something wild and beautiful. And through it all, I'll be there, watching, sharing it with you. His voice was filled with emotion, a tenderness that almost made my heart ache. The proposition hung in the air, thick with possibility. It felt unreal, like we were on the edge of something that could change everything. My mind was still reeling, but one thing was clear. Aiden wasn't just asking me to do something wild. He was asking me to trust him in a way that was deeper than I ever thought possible. I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. What if I don't want to? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I wanted to voice my hesitation, to let him know that this was a big leap for me. Aiden's expression softened, and he cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle. I know this is a lot to ask, he said softly, his voice full of understanding. But I would never push you to do anything you weren't comfortable with. This is about us, about exploring something together. If it's not something you want, I'll never ask you again. His words were sincere, and the way he looked at me left no doubt that he wasn't trying to control me, but rather give me the space to choose for myself. I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Fear, excitement, uncertainty. But most of all, I felt something deep inside of me stirring, something I couldn't ignore. There was a part of me that was intrigued, curious, and maybe even excited at the prospect of something so forbidden, so bold. I don't know, I whispered. my mind still spinning with thoughts and emotions I wasn't sure how to process. Aiden smiled gently and kissed my forehead. Take your time. I want you to feel safe with whatever you decide, but know that I love you, and whatever you choose, we'll do it together. And in that moment, as his lips met mine in a tender kiss, I felt something I hadn't expected, a deep, unspoken connection, a trust between us that felt even stronger than before. The proposition was a step into the unknown, a step that could lead to something exhilarating, or perhaps something that would forever change us. But in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, we were in it together. The days leading up to the night Lucas had arranged were filled with anticipation. Nervousness churned in my stomach. Every time I thought about it, my heart would race, half dread, half curiosity. I had never felt such a mix of emotions before, but I couldn't deny the desire to make this work, to experience this with Lucas. Finally, the night arrived. We drove to the hotel where everything was planned. My palms were clammy, my heart hammering in my chest. But as soon as we entered the room, I saw them. 3 men stood there, tall, confident, powerful. They exuded strength, each one of them commanding attention with their presence alone. My pulse quickened as they looked at me, their eyes dark with desire. I was overwhelmed, but Lucas was there beside me, his hand on my back, guiding me forward. He leaned in close, his voice soft in my ear. Don't be nervous. This is for you. I want you to enjoy every moment. I looked at him, and there was no turning back. I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to give him this moment. And in doing so, I began to realize something profound. This wasn't just about a fantasy. It was about trust. It was about pushing boundaries and sharing an experience that could bond us in ways we had never imagined. The first man stepped forward, his touch gentle yet commanding. My heart raced as his lips found mine, soft at first, then deeper, more urgent. My body responded to the way he held me, strong yet tender. The second man stood behind me, his breath warm against my neck, his hands roaming across my body, while the third man watched, his eyes never leaving me. The air in the room became thick with passion. Each touch, each kiss was a new experience. I felt alive in ways I had never felt before. The desire was overwhelming, and as each man took their turn, I surrendered to the moment, to the connection we shared. The days leading up to that fateful night were a blur of nervous anticipation, tinged with moments of excitement I couldn't quite control. Aiden was the one who made sure everything was arranged meticulously, as though he had planned every detail, with a kind of precision that made the whole idea seem more real with each passing hour. And me? I was torn, my emotions a whirlwind. A part of me was terrified, questioning every decision I'd made, while another part, an unexpected, curious part, was intrigued by the notion of stepping into a world that felt foreign and thrilling. What was going to happen tonight? Was I ready for this? On the evening of the event, everything seemed to slow down, the world around me moving at a strange pace. I couldn't quite shake the nerves that had settled in my chest. I found myself staring at the clock, watching the minutes tick by, my mind racing with questions and doubts. Yet, there was no turning back. This was happening. Tonight, everything was about to change. Aiden had arranged for us to meet at a hotel, a sleek, modern building with glass windows that stretched up into the sky, reflecting the city lights. The moment we arrived, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was as though the air had shifted, and I was standing on the edge of something immense, something unknown. Aiden, sensing my tension, placed his hand gently on my back, his touch warm and grounding. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. But even through the tenderness, I could hear the excitement. There was something thrilling about what he had planned, something undeniable. His gaze met mine, and there was a spark in his eyes that I hadn't seen before, familiar yet foreign. It was the look of a man who had orchestrated something extraordinary, something that was about to unfold. His confidence was intoxicating, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibilities. "We're almost there," Aiden murmured, his voice full of reassurance, his fingers lightly tracing circles on my skin. "Just trust me, okay? This is what we've talked about." As we walked through the sleek hotel lobby, I could feel the anticipation building in the pit of my stomach, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my shoulders. The moment we stepped into the elevator, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored walls. My reflection showed a woman caught between fear and excitement, wearing a mix of vulnerability and desire. I was about to step into something wild, something that would challenge every notion I had of myself. and my relationship. The elevator doors opened on the top floor, where we were greeted by a tall, imposing figure, one of the men Aiden had invited. His presence was powerful, magnetic, and the moment he smiled at me, I could feel my body respond. My heart fluttered, my breath caught in my throat. The air seemed to change in that moment, thick with the intensity of the situation. "We've been waiting for you," the man said, his voice deep and steady, sending a shiver down my spine. The room was dimly lit, designed to feel intimate, luxurious even, with velvet drapes hanging loosely on the walls and soft lighting casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. As we stepped further inside, the other two men emerged from the shadows. They were all tall, muscular, and exuded an undeniable confidence. Their eyes locked onto me, their gaze intense, unwavering, and I felt a strange rush of warmth flood through my veins. One of the men, taller than the rest, moved forward and introduced himself, his voice a soothing melody that contrasted with the raw strength his body emanated. He had a presence that demanded attention, his posture proud, his movements deliberate. He reached out, offering his hand with a knowing smile that sent a shiver through me. The moment his hand touched mine, I felt a spark, a crackling connection that I hadn't expected. Aiden stood beside me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pride and desire. It was clear that this was not just about the physical act, it was about power, control, and the dynamics of trust. He wanted to see me, to experience me, but there was something more to it. He wanted to witness this transformation, to see me shed my reservations and give in to something deeper. "Relax," Aiden whispered in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "You're beautiful, and this is for you. I want you to enjoy this, to feel everything." The men moved around me, their presence overwhelming, but somehow comforting as well. The first man, who had been watching me intently, stepped closer. I could see the desire in his eyes, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. His hand gently brushed my arm, sending a ripple of electricity through me. His touch was firm yet gentle, and it ignited a fire within me that I hadn't realized was there. Behind me, I could feel the second man, his presence solid and powerful. He moved in close, his chest brushing against my back as his hand slipped around my waist. He whispered something in my ear, his words sending a wave of heat through my body, intensifying the moment. My heart began to race as his lips pressed lightly against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The third man stood back, watching us with a calm intensity, his gaze fixed on me as if taking in every detail, every subtle shift of my body. His eyes were dark, filled with curiosity and desire, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of his attention. There was no escaping it. My body was already responding to them, my mind a mix of confusion and overwhelming anticipation. Aiden's hand was on my back again, guiding me forward, his touch like a tether, keeping me grounded as I felt myself being pulled in different directions. The room was alive with energy, the air charged with the anticipation of what was about to unfold. I could hear the soft sounds of breathing, the slight shuffle of feet against the floor, and the gentle hum of the city outside. But all of that seemed distant as I focused on the men before me. Their touch, their presence, their intent. "Are you ready?" Aiden's voice broke through the fog in my mind. His question was simple, but it carried a weight that made my heart race even faster. I turned to face him, looking into his eyes, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. It was just the two of us, and his confidence, his trust in me in this moment, filled me with a strange sense of power. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling, though not with fear, more with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one that made my stomach tighten with desire. "I'm scared." Aiden smiled, his fingers brushing against my cheek. "I know, love, but this is for us, for our bond. Just trust me." And then everything seemed to shift. The men stepped closer, their movements deliberate and full of purpose. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The tension was palpable, thick, as though we were all standing on the edge of something monumental, something that would change everything. I couldn't help but wonder, as I stood there surrounded by the three men and Aiden, if I was truly ready for this. Would I lose myself in their embrace? Would I find something I didn't know I was missing? All I knew was that tonight, everything was going to change. And as the first man stepped forward, I took a deep breath, and my journey into the unknown began. Everything I had known, everything I had felt about love, desire, and trust was about to be redefined. As the night ended, I was left breathless. my mind still spinning from the intensity of the experience. I lay there, surrounded by these men who had taken me to places I had never imagined. But it wasn't just about the physical pleasure. It was about the trust Lucas and I had built, about the love that had only deepened in the process. Looking at Lucas, I saw pride in his eyes. He had watched me, not with jealousy, but with love, wanting me to experience something that would change us both. And as I lay there in the quiet aftermath, I knew we had crossed a threshold together, one that had brought us closer than ever before.